Welcome to Crossroads. Folks, a lot going on right now. Crossroads, of course, we're a show by the Epoch Times, America's largest newspaper, independent on that side. And if you want to support our reporting, please do not forget to hit the like button. It really does help get the show out to more people. I want to talk about a lot of things today. We'll get into Epstein, but I want to start with something else first. In a sweeping move, the Trump administration, they ended a long list of taxpayer-funded programs that were benefiting illegal immigrants. This includes programs on housing, education, grants, and a lot of others. Kind of a sweeping move, multi-agency, and they just got rid of a ton of it. Now, first, this is what was announced through Health and Human Services. Let me show you. It says, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, HHS, today announced a significant policy shift to restore compliance with federal law and ensure that taxpayer-funded program benefits intended for the American people are not diverted to subsidize illegal aliens. In other words, they're trying to make sure that the money you pay in taxes is not being sent to people who are here illegally. It says HHS has formally rescinded a 1998 interpretation of the Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunity Reconciliation Act of 1996, PRWORA, issued during the Clinton administration. That was Bill Clinton, of course, which improperly extended certain federal public benefits to illegal aliens. It says for over 2 decades, that 1998 policy, quote, improperly narrowed the scope of PRWORA, undercutting the law by allowing illegal aliens to access programs Congress intended only for the American people. So if you're wondering, well, how can they get all these benefits? It's because of that 1996 law where Americans were supposed to get something and they just said, hey, the water's fine, everybody come on in. It says with this update, HHS is complying with the law, ensuring that federal benefits are administered with transparency, legal integrity, and fairness to the American people. In other words, no more free handouts. And it doesn't end there either. They're also getting rid of free tuition for illegal immigrants and a whole lot of other things. Epoch Times said this, multiple agencies updated their policies on July 10th. In other words, again, all at once, sweeping move, multi-agency, and it's to block illegal immigrants from receiving federal benefits through their programs. It says the move follows President Donald Trump's executive order in February directing federal agencies to identify government-funded programs that, quote, permit illegal aliens to obtain any cash or non-cash public benefit, and to bring those programs align with the Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunity Reconciliation Act, the one I just mentioned, PRWORA. A law, it says, that prohibits illegal immigrants from getting federal public benefits. In other words, the jig is up. The jig is up. They created an exception for this more than 2 decades ago. It's gone. It's no longer there, meaning all the agencies having to now align with the new interpretation, which is the older interpretation prior to 1996. That's what's happening. And in addition to what we mentioned before, it says the Department of Education, DOE, said on July 10th that illegal immigrants will no longer have access to taxpayer-funded benefits in post-secondary education programs such as Pell Grants and student loans, which they were getting. Further, in its states, the Department of Education stated that it was rescinding a Dear Colleague letter issued by former President Bill Clinton in 1997 that had allowed illegal immigrants to access federal public benefits for career, technical, and adult education programs. Now, again, this isn't like, visas and people here on like student visas and stuff like that. This is illegal immigrants. Illegal immigrants can no longer receive these things. And so if they want to come here and study and, find a good job and so on, well, they got to wait in line and do it the legal way is what they're saying. Further, it says the Department of Agriculture issued a notice on July 10th clarifying its latest interpretation of the term federal public benefit under PRWORA, stating that illegal immigrants will no longer be eligible to receive, quote, any grant, contract, loan, professional license, or commercial license. You're not going to be able to legally start a business, in other words, and that's through its government-funded programs. Again, If taxpayers have to pay for it, they can no longer get it. It notes it would also block illegal immigrants' access to any retirement, welfare, health, disability, public or assisted housing, post-secondary education, food assistance, unemployment benefit, or any other similar benefit. None of it that is funded by the government, meaning funded by your taxes, according to the Federal Registry Notice. And it doesn't end there. It says further in, the Department of Labor, the DOL Employment and Training Administration, also released new guidelines that will block illegal immigrants from accessing federal workforce development resources and grants. The jig is up, in other words. At least at the federal level. Let me explain. Because look, just because programs like this are ending at the federal level does not mean they're necessarily going to end at the state or local level. A lot of states, even a lot of cities, they're trying to find other ways to continue supporting illegal immigrants. One of the simplest ways they can do it is they make it illegal to ask about a person's, are you here legally or illegally? If they just remove the question, which would require them to determine, are you an illegal immigrant or an American citizen, it means everybody is eligible, and that's the easy way to do it. At the state level, and even again at the city level, you have some people doing that. Case in point, actually, in Los Angeles, Mayor Karen Bass, she discussed a plan to give financial assistance to illegal immigrants. And Mayor Bass announced this during a press conference on Friday, while also saying the money will not come from taxpayers, but instead from philanthropic partners. Watch this.
The executive directive that I will be signing in a few minutes is to help the city family, to help the city workforce, to help the city departments and all of the general managers essentially develop preparedness plans that have specific protocols and that help city workers know how to address immigration officials should they approach a city department. How we abide by the law, but we understand what our rights are as city employees, how we can provide protection for immigrants who might be attending a city event or at a city property, but we stay within the law. That we make sure that people that work with city contractors ensure that they are safe on city properties. I just want to repeat the irony that I am going to sign an executive directive to help the city family understand how to protect the workforce and Angelenos from our federal government. With that, I would...
Now, in a post on X, she also stated, quote, "The entire LA region is showing that we won't stand by while our communities are attacked." And she also linked an article explaining the city's lawsuit against the Trump administration. If you go to that article, this is what it says. This is ABC7. It says LA County and several other cities, Montebello, Culver City, Monterey Park, Pasadena, Pico Rivera, Santa Monica, and West Hollywood are also seeking to join the lawsuit brought last week by the American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU, and other immigration and civil rights groups. It says the lawsuit alleges that federal agencies, including U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement and U.S. Customs and Border Protection, CBP, have engaged in unconstitutional and unlawful immigration raids by targeting, it says, Angelenos based on their perceived, they mean people from Los Angeles, based on their race and ethnicity, and also denying detainees constitutionally mandated due process. In other words, they're alleging that they're racially profiling. They're saying, does this person look like they're an illegal immigrant? And they just question them, right? Kind of like a stop and frisk, but are you a citizen or not? And that's what they're being accused of doing. It's what they are doing, but they're questioning whether that's legal or not. On the government side, they're saying, yes, it is legal for them to do that. But on that note also, ICE and Customs and Border Protection, they also announced they rescued 10 unaccompanied migrant children when they were raiding a marijuana facility in California. And it's been a big dispute because some people are saying that was a strawberry farm, and basically what's happening is Homeland Security is posting pictures of the marijuana grows and saying, what kind of strawberries are these? Anyways, during the raid, they were also shot at by some of the protesters. The whole thing is pretty wild. DHS actually said this. They said, DHS today released the following statement after U.S. Immigration Customs Enforcement, again ICE, and CBP officers faced gunfire while conducting operations at 2 marijuana grow sites in California. It says the shooter remains at large, but the individual was seen pulling a gun out and firing at officers. Now, it notes that on July 10, 2025, federal law enforcement officers executed criminal warrant operations at marijuana grow sites in Cupertino and Camarillo. During the operation, at least 10 migrant children were rescued from potential exploitation, forced labor, and human trafficking. And federal officers also arrested approximately 200 illegal aliens from both sites in Cupertino and Camarillo. It says during the operation, more than 500 rioters attempted to disrupt the operation. How dare you arrest these humble farmers, these undocumented farmers, right? And it says 4 U.S. citizens are being criminally processed for assaulting or resisting officers, and the rioters damaged vehicles, and 1 violent agitator fired a gun at law enforcement officers. It says the FBI is now offering a $50,000 reward for any information leading to the arrest of the violent rioter, the guy who shot the gun at them. It says the individual was caught on video firing what looked like a pistol at federal law enforcement. And despite law enforcement's heroic actions, they say, to rescue these children, politicians are defending rioters and attacking our men and women in uniform. What really happened? Again, it was framed as them raiding like a farm. How dare you go after these humble strawberry farmers? It turned out that they had about 200 illegal immigrants there, 10 of whom were underage. Were they being exploited? They're not really saying that. But you did have, they don't even say the ages, so maybe they were like 17 years old, you know what I mean? We don't really know. Within those humble strawberry farming operations were also marijuana farming operations, and so that was the deeper context of it. There were videos of police cars going by, people throwing big rocks at them, like smashing windshields. Donald Trump was very angry at this. At least he seemed to be. He published a post actually on Truth Social where he, at least in writing, authorized Border Patrol and so on to actually carry out arrests when people throw stones or other things at their vehicles like that. We'll see if they act on it. They probably will. Now look, on another topic though, another big controversy. Well, the Epstein files have led to, or let's say the lack thereof, have led to very widespread public backlash. And I mean, rumors of internal divisions in the Trump administration. I'll be explaining this. I'll be talking more about this after we come back from a quick break.
All right, just to pause here for a super quick moment. You are, of course, watching Crossroads with Joshua Philipp. I'm just here to share a message about American Hartford Gold, my own personal gold and silver bullion dealer. Now, obviously, the recent tariffs have made the markets super turbulent and volatile. With every new piece of tariff news, the markets seem to either crash up or crash down. And of course, it's worth mentioning that these conditions don't only affect Wall Street. They affect all of us through our investments and our retirement accounts. That's why I'd like to introduce you to a company that I trust and I myself use to secure my own savings, American Hartford Gold. They specialize in helping Americans move our assets into something tangible, into something you can actually hold, which is physical gold and physical silver, 2 precious metals that act as a hedge against all those decisions being made in Washington, D.C. They have an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. They have thousands of 5-star reviews, and they make the whole buying process super simple. Your metals can be shipped directly to your door, or you can transfer your current retirement account to a tax-advantaged gold IRA. And the best part is that right now, American Hartford Gold is offering an exclusive offer. When you call them today and you mention the name Joshua, you could receive up to $15,000 in free silver with your initial investment. Take advantage of their special offer. You can either just call them at 877-260-2764 or text Joshua to 65532. All their information will also be down in the description box below. And now, back to Crossroads.
Welcome back. Don't forget to hit the like button, and also let me know what you think of the show in the comments. This actually does really help the channel grow. I see some of you in the chat are mentioning the youngest at the strawberry farm / marijuana grow was 14 years old. We'll see what details come out on this. At least when I was a kid, I think you get a work permit at that age, right? But on another topic, something a lot of people are now wondering about, the recent announcements on the Epstein files, or the lack of the Epstein files. This is leading to very widespread public backlash. I think I've never seen this amount of really normal Trump supporters really be against him on this one. Trump is dealing with this. I'll show you what he says. Basically, right now there's rumors of internal division in the Trump administration. Trump came out, clarified this. I know people were saying Dan Bongino's threatening to quit. Trump said he talked to him. Things are okay. Cash is pretty stable. He says he's not going anywhere. There were a lot of discussions on this. But let me show you how this whole thing went down. In response to the backlash, President Donald Trump issued a public statement where he defended his administration. And he also gave more details on the decision, right? And the Post, well, this was met also with a lot of backlash from people who otherwise are very positive on Trump. And you can see it on Truth Social also. This is what he wrote on Truth Social. Donald Trump, he says, "What's going on with my boys and in some cases gals? They're all going after Attorney General Pam Bondi, who's doing a fantastic job." He said, we are on one team, MAGA, and I don't like what's happening. We have a perfect administration, the talk of the world, and selfish people are trying to hurt it all over a guy who never dies, Jeffrey Epstein. I'll go over what Trump says again, and we'll go deeper into it. But Trump said this as well. He said, "For years, it's over and over again. Why are we giving publicity to files written by Obama, Crooked Hillary, Comey, Brennan?" And he said, "The losers and criminals of the Biden administration who conned the world with Russia hoax, 51 intelligence agents, the laptop from hell, and more." He said they created the Epstein files. Interesting. He said they created the Epstein files just like they created the fake Hillary Clinton, Christopher Steele dossier that they used on me, and now my so-called friends are playing right into their hands. He said, why didn't these radical left lunatics release the Epstein files? If there was anything in there that could have hurt the MAGA movement, why didn't they use it? They haven't even given up on the John F. Kennedy or Martin Luther King Jr. files. No matter how much success we have had securing the border, deporting criminals, fixing the economy, energy dominance, a safer world where Iran will not have nuclear weapons, it's never enough for some people, Trump said. And he added, we are about to achieve more in 6 months than any other administration has achieved in over 100 years. And we have so much more to do. He said, we're saving our country and making America great again, which will continue to be our complete priority. And he said, the left is imploding. Kash Patel, again, head of the FBI, and the FBI, he said, must be focused on investigating voter fraud, political corruption, Act Blue, the rigged and stolen election of 2020, and arresting thugs and criminals instead of spending month after month looking at nothing but the same old radical left-inspired documents on Jeffrey Epstein. Which is interesting because he's suggesting that there are documents on it, which they're also saying there are not. But he also said, let Pam Bondi do her job. She's great. The 2020 election was rigged and stolen, and they tried to do the same thing in 2024. That's what she is looking into as AG and much more. He's suggesting, basically, if there are Epstein files, I mean, remember, the thing they're saying that doesn't exist is a client list, right? They're saying there's no client list. They're not saying there's no Epstein files, just to be clear on that. But he's saying effectively that maybe somebody wrote them as kind of a time bomb to blow up the administration, effectively. Suggesting that somebody wrote them, and if they were to just release them, maybe it was done with malintent, with the purpose of destroying the people they want to destroy. That's at least what he's suggesting here, right? And so he's saying that AG Pam Bondi has other things to do. She's investigating election fraud. That's what he says right here, in fact. And Trump said also, 1 year ago, our country was dead. Now it's the hottest country anywhere in the world. Let's keep it that way and not waste time and energy on Jeffrey Epstein, somebody that nobody cares about. I'll explain that in a minute. But it says, thank you for your attention to this matter. Okay, look, it seems like Trump is suggesting there are documents, right? There are documents, but that these documents would represent a fabricated attack similar to the Trump-Russia documents and so on, that somebody probably put them together, maybe even added stuff to them with the knowledge that Trump and everybody else was saying on the campaign trail that they were going to release everything. Imagine if your opponents are saying, we're going to release everything. And you're like, you don't say. And you, of course, then say, well, I'm going to insert some documents into this. Maybe some low confidence intelligence. And then when they release everything, it has the effect of destroying anybody the person on the inside wanted to destroy. I don't know if that's the case. That does seem to be what Trump is suggesting here. In fact, that's what he's saying directly, right? If you look at the reactions to that post, I've never seen this many otherwise conservatives and Trump supporters really not be happy about it. A very large number are suggesting this could actually damage his support base. If you read through the comments on Truth Social, a lot of people, it's clear that they make it clear they like Trump, so these are among his voters, but they say this is a bad call, and a lot of people, I'd say more so than not by a large degree, really seem to disagree with it, at least in the comments, right? Now look at the Conservative Student Action Summit in Florida, which I just got back from. This was also a big topic. There were a lot of major influencers who spoke about this on the main stage. I'd say a lot of them, in fact. By the way, I spoke there as well. I talked about a Chinese subversion of our government. But this was also a big topic there. And so, again, we'll see if Trump's announcement, we'll have to see if it cools the backlash. Kash Patel, FBI director, he also came out and he said effectively, these are rumors, these are fake rumors, conspiracy theories. And it's interesting because remember, Kash Patel was a big advocate of getting the Epstein files out. He was very much convinced that there was really, bad stuff in there that the public had to see. He's walking that back now. And I mean, look at it how you will. You could suggest that maybe now that they've been able to see what's actually in these things, I don't know. Maybe they know something we don't know. Unfortunately, this has been more than, a couple decades now, right? Or well over a decade. This has been an issue for more than a decade, and the public has been wanting to see this for more than a decade. And there has been a lot of speculation. Has this become larger than life? Are they hiding it from us? We don't know. And we'll see if we ever know at this rate, frankly. There have also been a lot of rumors going around. If you read a lot of the chatter going on, in fact, even a lot of conservative news outlets, they're alleging, or at least were, that Assistant FBI Director Dan Bongino was threatening to resign. He was saying if Pam Bondi doesn't resign as Attorney General, he's out. He never said this publicly. It was rumor. Trump said he talked to Dan Bongino. Things are okay. Pam Bondi came out with a statement. Kash Patel came out with a statement. As of now, it does not look like anybody's going to resign over this. It looks like the waters are cooled, at least on that side. You're probably going to be hearing a lot more about this, though, because, in my opinion, the story's not going to die unless all the people talking about it just stop talking about it. And if you look at a lot of the big conservative influencers, I don't think Alex Jones is going to stop talking about this. I don't think Tucker Carlson's ever going to stop talking about this. And so this will probably be a meta conspiracy narrative for the indefinite future. But we'll see. We will see, right? We don't really have anything solid on this. As of now, it's basically all speculation. We don't have anything on the surface. Even the documents that were released were basically just ironically more redacted versions of things that were already public through leaks. Now, with that said, though, Donald Trump is also noting that he hopes other investigations go on, including, as he said directly, voter fraud, political corruption, Act Blue. You might remember that James O'Keefe with Project Veritas and now O'Keefe Media Group, OMG, He was alleging that they were involved in some very nefarious things with the elections. And Trump also said they're investigating the, quote, rigged and stolen election of 2020, and they're also arresting thugs and criminals. So they're busy with other things, it seems, and they want to let the whole Epstein narrative go to the wayside as much as possible. We'll see if Trump's base allows that to happen, because right now people are very riled up on this. I've never seen so much pushback from his own base on this, actually, but we'll see. Meanwhile, though, the high tariffs are back, and we're also seeing some countries get hit with especially high tariffs, in fact, one of them being Canada. In a letter to Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, which Trump posted on Truth Social, he's been making all this public, Trump announced the dreaded 35% tariff that he was promising. And this is on Canadian imports. That begins on August 1st. He's announcing all of it. All of them take hold come August. And Trump is saying these tariffs, he said they're a response to Canada's retaliatory practices and trade barriers. For example, 400% tariffs on American dairy farmers, as well as Canada's failure, he said, to curb the inflow of fentanyl. He's saying that you have the El Chapo of the North, apparently, and that they're engaged in the fentanyl trade. Canada, on their side, they've denied this. They've said they're doing as much as they can to stop it. It's not enough for Trump, right? Trump also threatened that if Canada were to retaliate further, if they're to raise their 400% tariffs on dairy or whatever else, then, well, the United States, he said, is going to match the number on top of the announced 35%. And realistically, this is going to hit Canada pretty hard. Remember, when tariffs in the range of even like 10% were being discussed on Canada, and then like 25%, well, it was said that even that would be detrimental to their economy. This could implode the Canadian economy. And if you understand what the Canadian economy is based on, it's energy exports, it's manufacturing, it's timber, it's stuff like that. And Trump is talking about bringing all of that stateside anyway. So aside from us probably just trading less with Canada and trying to bring back our factories, well, Canada could be in a pretty rough spot. This could be detrimental to their economy. They're going to be trying to look for other trading partners, but as I mentioned before on the show, it's easy to buy something. If you're the buyer, you can find a million people who want to sell to you. If you're the seller, you're competing with everybody else to try to convince the buyer to buy from you. When it comes to all these tariffs in the global markets, America is the buyer, and the tariffs are affecting them on that level. It's not going to be easy for them to just say, hey, who wants to buy a whole bunch of timber and energy? Probably not a lot of countries, frankly. But some tariffs also go beyond trade, as Trump was mentioning as well. A lot of this is retaliatory. Some of them also work on other issues, other means. We're seeing, for example, that Trump is putting enhancers, for example, in the tariffs against Brazil. Remember, Donald Trump noted this is partly due to the country's policies on censorship, saying they're censoring people in the United States, that there are secret court orders ordering tech companies to censor people, and we're not being told all about that, but that's part of it. And Trump also raised concerns over Brazil's treatment of the former president, Jair Bolsonaro, who's facing a lot of attacks right now internally. It also seems the plan to fill the U.S. Treasury with money from tariffs, that's also working. Interestingly, while we're all talking about the deficit, they just posted an announcement. The first surplus, not deficit, surplus, since the early days of Trump's first term in office. 2017 was the last time he had that. Now, CNBC said this. It says, the U.S. government posted a surplus in June as tariffs gave an extra bump to a sharp increase in receipts, the Treasury Department said Friday. It said as well, the government red ink swelling through the year. Last month just saw a surplus of just over $27 billion. Now, you might say $27 billion, that's not a very big surplus. Heck, we spend that on your average, trans opera and, Latin America every year. But that you should keep in mind, the $27 billion surplus is what is raised to the surface out of a $316 billion deficit back in May. So that's a lot of money, right? It means we're out of the red, at least the Treasury is. And it notes as well here, that brought the fiscal year-to-date deficit to $1.34 trillion, up 5% from a year ago. However, with calendar adjustment, the deficit actually edged lower by 1%. It says there are 3 months left in the current fiscal year, which ends September 30th. A 13% increase in receipts from the same month a year ago helped bridge the gap, with outlays down 7% for the year. And it says receipts are up 7% while spending has risen 6%. In other words, things are kind of improving, right? And it's the government last posted a June surplus way back in 2017, right after Donald Trump took office during his first term, of course. Now, alongside all of this, other things are happening. The cuts, the consolidations, all the things we're watching under the Doge department. This is continuing, even after Elon Musk had some disagreements with the Trump administration and after he left his role at Doge. Now, the U.S. State Department just announced a large amount of cuts now underway. They're still cutting, they're still firing people, all that's still going on. 8WGAL said the State Department is firing over 1,300 career diplomats and civil servants in line with a dramatic reorganization plan initiated by the Trump administration earlier this year. It says a senior State Department official said Friday the department is sending layoff notices to 1,107 civil servants and 246 foreign service officers with domestic assignments in the United States. While lauded by President Donald Trump's administration as overdue and necessary to make the department leaner and more efficient, like Doge, right, Department of Government Efficiency, it says the cuts have been roundly criticized by current and former diplomats who say they will weaken U.S. influence and its ability to counter existing and emerging threats abroad. If I was being laid off, I'd tell them it was weakening them as well, right? So anyway, if you look at the other numbers, aside from the people being directly laid off, it looks like about 3,000 people might lose their job with the State Department in one way or another. So there is a big shift taking place that they're also, remember they took USAID and folded it into the State Department. They're now effectively bringing that to an end. And they're also doing a lot with actual foreign aid, consolidating that as well, getting rid of some parts and keeping some others. And so the whole thing is being shifted right now. All right, everyone, that said, questions, comments, anything, leave it in the chat. Let's jump into a discussion. Ashley from California, you're saying, none of the cities or news shows out here are talking about the weed farm and no mention of the child labor and unaccompanied minors found. Interesting. You know, that tends to be the way that the media works, though. Okay, look, no matter which side you're on, there's always a temptation of omission. Sometimes you can lie by omission. You leave something out. You don't say the thing that makes things kind of look bad. You don't say the thing that damages your narrative, right? There's a temptation at all times to guard, the narrative you want to keep. And so you do see it a lot with the big corporate media. You see it on both sides of the aisle. This is not necessarily like a partisan thing. It is an unfortunate reality, I'd say, just of human nature. But when it comes to these huge corporations, sometimes I would question whether there's a business decision being made, whether it's just the individuals or if there's something bigger at play. I don't know. I do think that's unfortunate, though. And on that point as well, I'd say that's I'd also say that's why I think a lot of media are losing the trust of the public. Because, look, let's be honest with ourselves. Even if people are watching those outlets and they're like, oh no, 200 innocent strawberry growers were arrested today, and they jump on Facebook or X, I don't know if Blue Sky is going to have this, but they jump on a social media and they see a video of people lobbing rocks at police vehicles and a guy pulling a gun out and shooting it, looking like he's shooting at police. And then you hear that they arrested, like, I don't know, people doing like drug operations and all this other stuff. Like, people are going to see it. People are going to see it. If you just try to not talk about the things people have seen, it looks like you're dishonest. And so, I think it would be better for them if they really want to defend the narrative to acknowledge the truth or acknowledge what happened and then, I don't know, try to explain their side of it, If I were to talk about that, I'd say, well, look, this is just me being fair, right? I'd say, well, look, maybe it was a strawberry farm. Maybe not everybody there was involved in the drug side of it. Maybe that was more of like a clandestine element of that. I don't know. And of course, I doubt that all the protesters, you had 500 protesters, I doubt that they knew that they were defending a marijuana grow. The other side too is a lot of people would say, well, like, marijuana isn't even really illegal in California. Like, if they busted a marijuana grow in California, you get a fine. It's not like a major criminal charge. They give you a fine. A lot of the drug operations, a lot of the cartels moved their operations to the United States, and they just do it illegally because it's cheaper to pay the fine than it is to get the license. Crazy, right? So, we'll see, right? California guy, you're saying, how much will the cut on handouts affect illegal immigrants? And you're saying, what will we do with them if they end up homeless and destitute? Can we deport them fast enough so they can survive? Yeah, so on that front, I know some illegal immigrants who get all kinds of handouts. I know some who get disability. I know some who get all kinds, like, they're older, and so they get all kinds of benefits. And part of the reason for that is because on the books, they don't ask you when you go to apply for it. They don't say, well, are you an American citizen? They look at you and they say, how long have you lived here for? What's your home address? Okay, you're a resident of California. You're a resident of New York or something like that. And they just give it to you, right? So they don't inquire about legal status. I personally know people who like that, who get government handouts. Now, how is that going to affect them? Well, they're going to have a hard time. They're going to have to find other ways to make money. Maybe they'll take that $1,000 from the CBP Home app. I don't think they will. Maybe they'll try to live with other family members. I could see some of them doing that. I don't know. It depends on how old they are. It depends on what their actual status. It depends on their status, whether they have family here or not, and they could rely on them, or whether they're of age to work. You're probably going to be hearing a lot of sob stories on this. I guarantee there's going to be some people who are hit really hard by it, and you're going to have the media focusing on their stories. How could Donald Trump strip this elderly woman of, disability pay, and she's in a wheelchair or something like that? And, she's going to get sent back to like Guatemala, where she's going to be homeless, basically. You know what I mean? There are going to be cases like that. And the question is, as a country, well, to what extent are we responsible for that? To what extent should the American people be willing to help people in every corner of the world who are experiencing homelessness, as I think they say is the politically correct term now. So I don't know. I think the other side of it is the majority. You could say it's people who've been taking advantage of Americans also. I think that's going to be the narrative from the conservative side, that Americans are working hard, Americans have been taken advantage of, and you have people who've taken advantage of our generosity. People who know they're doing something wrong, who know that they came here illegally, who know that hardworking Americans are paying their paychecks every month, and that's not very nice to us either, right? So you could say, well, so sad for this person, but what about us, right? So sad for us too that we have been having to pay crazy high taxes for things for people just taking advantage of us, right? And there is such a thing as somebody taking advantage of kindness. And so I think that's the way it's going to be framed on the other side. You'll probably see both narratives, I'd say. James Dyson, you're saying, Josh, do you think that by Donald openly providing missiles to Ukraine via the EU paying for it is a signal to Russia that now it's too late? That Russia will now have to deal with the US, at least indirectly, perhaps for now. Will this become World War III? Yeah, so when it comes to Ukraine and the question of whether Donald Trump was going to be continuing sending them weapons, on the campaign trail, this was one of the really divisive issues. Not even necessarily Republicans and Democrats, even among Republicans. If you remember, former Vice President Mike Pence, when he was running for president in 2024, before Trump kind of steamrolled onto the scene, the freight train with no brakes crashed through. What was the narrative? Mike Pence was asked, would he continue providing arms to Ukraine? He said basically yes. And he was arguing that this is in America's interest. We cannot allow Russia to just do that. And this ties into broader issues. He was really slammed for it, actually. Remember during that time, the narrative among conservatives, at least if you looked at the chat among the conservative influencers and the narrative coming out from them, they were saying, why are we sending hundreds of billions of dollars to Ukraine when we have problems here, when we have mass illegal immigration and crime, and we're worried on, the economy was not looking good. It was looking great for the stock markets, but not great for the average American. Cost of living was going up, and the American people were saying, look, it's hard to get by right now. We're still trying to recover from COVID. Yeah, hey, the S&P 500 looks great, but it doesn't look so great on my paycheck. And the average American was having a hard time. When you're in a rough state and you're seeing money get spent just on a mass scale on something that you may not fully agree with, of course politicians are going to latch on to that and campaign on one side or the other of it. And so that became a very divisive issue. Leading into where we're at now, Donald Trump, remember, we almost had a peace deal. Volodymyr Zelensky, Ukrainian president, came to the White House, was going to have lunch. Everything was fine and dandy. And he didn't even say thank you, according to Vice President Mike Pence. He later said thank you, but he was questioned, did you even say thank you? And he was, of course, framed as demanding things from the United States and not being cordial enough, that he needed to be more grateful and maybe wear a suit. Remember, that was the narrative, right? We were that close to a peace deal, at least it looked like on the surface. Donald Trump now seems that he's kind of flipped. Now he seems to be suggesting that not Zelensky. He says he had some very good calls with Zelensky. He's now saying that Putin is the one giving him a run for his money, and that maybe he's been stringing the U.S. along. On Russia's side, they're dealing with China. The Chinese Communist Party even issued statements saying they're not going to allow Russia to lose the war. The context of that is China, the Chinese Communist Party, in its own writing seems interested in making this an everlasting war. They want to drag this out as long as possible. The exact statement they had was that they believe if the war ends, remember, it's not about what is at stake, it's about keeping the war going on China's side. They're saying if the war ends, it means that the United States will focus its military on China, which is happening right now, by the way. I'll get more into that tomorrow because there's a lot going on that. We're doing it anyway, right? But they want the war to continue indefinitely. And what you have now is Laos is also sending troops to fight alongside Russia. Laos is very close to the CCP. And so when I see that, I see that this, in my mind, I'd imagine the Chinese Communist Party is directing that behind the scenes. Because the announcement and the movement took place around the exact same time. And I know how close they are. So where do we stand? It's interesting because the announcement from the Trump administration just 2 or 3 weeks ago, they were saying that we had to stop sending so many missiles and stuff to Ukraine because our own surplus is running too short, that we're draining our military supplies. Keep in mind also, we just sent a lot to Israel. You know, the Iron Dome, and they were intercepting things. We supply that. I mean, good thing we did, or else the amount of missiles that were launched to Israel probably would have wiped out Tel Aviv. Like, they launched enough to just wipe it out. If it weren't for the Iron Dome and America providing that, they would have been decimated, probably. And so, you know, again, the good hearts of Americans prevented that from being a disaster, right? Now, as it currently stands, I think Trump is saying, we will supply Ukraine. We're not going to divert our military to there. We're actually diverting our military to focus on China. The thing the CCP is trying to prevent us from doing by getting us involved in these wars, Trump is doing it anyway. Iran has been mostly pacified as of now. And so I would say as of right now, the CCP's plan to start up all these different wars, it's mostly not worked. And we've seen demonstrated the American military weapons really against the Chinese military weapons through what are, let's be honest, what are proxy wars. I think that if the Trump administration can avoid staying out of direct conflict with Russia and Iran and other countries, at least unless you just kind of alley-oop and slam dunk bomb their nuclear sites like Trump did to Iran. Aside from that, I don't think it will divert us from focusing the military on China, which they're right now doing. Again, tomorrow I want to go into that because they're getting Japan and Australia on board too. Something really big is happening. Something really big is happening around China right now and in the U.S. military. What do I think is going to happen next? The United States, the big problem they have, they need to produce more weapons. And the problem they have on that front is our capabilities to develop these things quickly is not really there. Shipbuilding, weapons building, even like ammunition, they need to increase capacity. They need to increase capacity based on the amount that we're selling. Now, what does that mean for business? It's great for business. Anybody who knows the whole narrative of the military-industrial complex, it's great for business. Because where does the money go? If you're developing it domestically, let's say they put $100 billion into Ukraine, what does that actually mean? It means you put $100 billion into American military, contractors, and they build it, and the money goes into our economy. A lot of people would argue it works as almost a stimulus. So that money flows through our economy. And that's the narrative with it, right? But you will see that happen. But the other big thing you're going to watch is they need rare earth minerals for some of that development. And so there's going to be a battle not just to build more factories for military development, but also for natural resources. And that will probably become a very big issue as well. Another big question here. Alfred's mom, you're saying Canada allows fentanyl and illegals to come through the border. They really did not have a lot of border security until recently. Now, when Trump pressured Canada to start doing more, what did they do? The American northern border, or the Canadian southern border, is the largest unsecured border, or relatively unsecured border, like, I don't know about in the world, but it's one of the biggest, right? There was really not a lot of security there. You could argue that the weather and the forest, they make it a little more difficult, but there are a lot of areas where the border is really not secure. And so human trafficking operations, even a lot of drug operations, they have in fact moved to Canada. And they've been busting some pretty huge drug operations in Canada. I've been reporting on this for a long time. Even a lot of the money laundering for the cartels, it goes through Canada. The gangs there, you have a lot of biker gangs involved with it. You have a lot of, in Canada, they have Indian reservations, which, like in the United States, they're sovereign nations, and so it's hard for the government to really operate on there, and cartels and gangs take advantage of that. You have a lot of that going on too. And so I do think that now the southern border has been so massively, really massively secured. Imagine you're a business, you're an evil business, right? You're creating drugs and human trafficking and everything else, and you need to keep your business going, and you can't do it in one place. What do? Well, you move the factory, and a lot of the cartels, they moved the factory. They're now working out of Canada. I think Trump wants to see Canada do a lot more to crack down on those operations, to investigate it. The reality is they probably don't have the capacity for it. If they want to work with the United States, what will probably happen? I would imagine the United States will probably work with them on training and investigations and so on, and you might see a lot more of that going on. But we will see. Seymour Butts, you're saying we give free handouts when we allow illegals to operate businesses without a business license, no bonding, no insurance, and not paying Social Security, state or federal unemployment taxes. You're saying all this is free to them, but regular citizens have to pay. And people are mad about that, and rightly so. Because, okay, so I've talked to contractors. My dad works as a contractor. He runs a construction business. He does general contracting. What happens with them? Well, okay, so I know quite a lot about business because I've worked with my dad for like a lot of my life, and he's always had different businesses. He had a bug repellent distribution business in Latin America. It was cactus juice, prickly pear cactus, which works really well, by the way. He had juice bars at gyms. He had multiple restaurants. Again, contracting, general contracting, solar repair, building houses, everything. And so growing up, I've got to learn a lot about how to run a business. One thing I've come to understand, one of the biggest mistakes, okay, let's talk about the restaurant business. One of the biggest mistakes people have is they make their overhead too high. My dad has pointed out, you can kind of tell when a business is going to fail right from the get-go. If you see a business go in and they buy, let's say a restaurant, and they buy a huge building, 200 seats, that's going to be a huge overhead. Unless you can fill half of that every night, you're going to be losing money. Because what does that mean? You need to hire enough staff to be able to seat all those tables. So your overhead on staff is going to be very high. If you're planning on being able to serve all those 200 tables, you need to have the food and supplies prepared for that type of capacity. You also pay a lot more for rent, and so your overhead is going to be very, very high. Your bedding very high, and then what happens, right? What do you often see? How many of you have gone into a restaurant where they have 200 seats and they have half of it closed off? Oftentimes, right? They're not seating. They're not even using half their capacity because they know they don't have the employees. They don't even probably have, behind the kitchen and the freezers, they don't have enough food to even serve that number of people, so they close half the restaurant. In other words, they bought something bigger than they could handle and their overhead is too high, and they basically deal with that by cutting their capacity in half. A lot of places fail because of that. The ones that do really well, the ones where you see lines out the door, oftentimes have very, very small overhead. Sometimes they might not even have seating, or they have limited seating. A lot of restaurants these days, they make their money off deliveries. So you might walk into a restaurant and there's 5 people sitting there, but they have 20 Uber Eats orders in, which are equivalent to having 20 people sitting there. And so these days, a lot of people, they stay at home, they get Grubhub or Uber Eats or whatever else, and so the capacity of the restaurant is serving that. So Case in point, as it relates to illegal immigrants and the issue Seymour Butts raised. The problem you also have is competition. So if you're selling tacos for $10 and your quality is just okay, and there's a guy down the street selling tacos for $8 and his quality is just as good or better, people are probably going to go to the other guy, right? And if he can also cut his overhead, he can reduce his price more, and he can undercut you and put you out of business. That's what's happening to a lot of contractors. So a lot of people who run businesses, landscaping, construction, people doing electricity, right? Electricians, roofers, all that stuff. They're getting undercut by illegal immigrants because their overhead is lower. They don't, as Seymour Butts noted, they don't have to pay a lot of these registrations. They don't have to pay into that stuff. A lot of their workers are paid under the table, off the books. So their overhead is way lower. And they can also cut corners. They don't have to deal with like a lot of the licensing and stuff. What does that look like when they go to customers? Well, let's say you need to build an addition on your house and one guy quotes you at like $20,000 and the other guy quotes you at $17,000. Which one are you going to take? Probably the $17,000, right? Now, for a contractor, they're dealing with a lot of other, they have to factor it in, right? And so they can't really compete. And so what you have is a lot of these guys who have low overheads because they're effectively getting subsidies. If you want to get into the whole bigger debate on, like, as I mentioned, like Austrian economics and so on, and state interventionism and putting your finger on the scale, this basically works as state interventionism, a government fund through giving exceptions to one class. And so these people are given exceptions because of that. Their competition is here while everybody else is here. All the legal people are here. And they're dominating the market. They're making it so that you can't as easily make a living if you're in those industries. And so it's not very nice. It's really not very nice. Old Bean Blower, you're saying it's kind of looking like China might get their 4 wars. Well, they're well on their way, unfortunately. Now, if I were to give a recommendation to the United States on how to deal with that CCP plan, which they're not hiding anymore. Like anybody who's watched Crossroads for, 4 years, I've been talking about this for a long time. It's one of the, how should I say it? It's one of the downsides of being ahead of the curve is people don't always believe you, right? It happens to me a lot. On many stories, I've been a couple years or even more than a decade ahead of the curve. A lot of the reporting I had on like even Chinese subversion, I was like a decade ahead of the curve. The Chinese secret police stations, that only came out a few years ago. I've been talking about that since 2008. And so I've been very ahead of the curve for a long time. It does honestly get a bit tiring when you see something really serious and people don't believe you, right? But on the point of the 4 wars, on the point of that, finally they're getting it. Finally they're understanding it. Finally they're taking it seriously. And the CCP is no longer hiding it. I do believe as of now the United States is aware the CCP has a plan to do that. And I think that the way they're navigating this so far is very good. We are not involved in a massive terror war right now. To an extent, we're just, let's put it this way. We're not invading Afghanistan. We're not invading Iraq, right? What are we doing? We're just bombing terrorists. We're just bombing them here and there. And we're supplying munitions to Israel, and Israel's running a lot of those operations, right? So on the terror front, that's what we're doing. We're not getting directly involved. On the Latin America front, I'd say Trump is probably subduing any possible war through tariffs. He's he's pacified a lot of what could have happened there. We'll see if that lasts. Hopefully it does. Hopefully things get pacified, but as of now, we're not invading, Brazil or something like that, right? That's not happening. Because, and I mentioned that too, because the CCP, they actually wanted us, this is them, not me, but Chin Can Rong, one of Xi Jinping's main advisors, wanted us to go to war with Brazil during Lula's previous term. That's what they wanted. We're not doing that. There's no sign we're doing that. I would assume that's pacified. And when it comes to Russia, that one is the biggest. That one has the biggest risk of expanding. It's already turning into a multi-country war. The involvement now of North Korea, Laos, openly now the Chinese Communist Party, and Trump pushing, again, NATO allies. France is getting very heavily involved in it. And the risk that Russia may actually expand the war into other like Baltic states and so on, the risk is very high. That actually does have a very big threat. That one is the big one. And I believe that's why Trump is changing his mind on whether or not we continue supplying Ukraine. I think he's realizing that basically the U.S. needs to get involved to prevent it from expanding. And I think that's why he's doing it. So as of now, it's true that we're walking on the edge of a knife when it comes to the CCP's stated plans and whether or not they can do it. But as of now, it's not happening. And it does, I'll be talking about it tomorrow because I want to go into it. It does look like the U.S., the strength of the U.S. military is shifting, and we're focusing on China. There's a lot going on there right now. And that blows up the CCP's plan because that's what they were trying to stop from happening. They were trying to stop that. So we will see. All right, everyone, that said, join me tomorrow for that wonderful discussion and a lot more. There's so much to talk about just on a daily basis. Let me know in the chat what you think. You can talk any topic you want. There's a lot of wild stuff going on right now. I know everyone's focused on Epstein, but there's a lot of other stuff too. Unfortunately, I think on that discussion, there's not a lot we can do other than speculate, right? And the speculation will probably go on forever. A lot of other things going on, a lot of investigations, a lot of global problems, and I'm hoping we don't get pulled into a full-scale war. For me, that's among my bigger concerns right now. My biggest concern actually is, Kathleen, you're funny. My bigger concern right now is more like CCP subversion within the United States. Something I've been talking about for almost 2 decades now, but there's a lot going on. That said, thank you all so much for being here. Please join me tomorrow, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Also, please don't forget to hit the like button. It really does help support our show. I will see you all tomorrow. And as always, please take care of yourselves, stay informed, and stay free. Thank you.